Hey everyone, DJ Stutz here with Little Hearts Academy and the Imperfect Heroes podcast. And thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us today. And today I have a fabulous guest I'm really excited about. And we're going to be talking about attunement. Let's see what that means. Bill Senyard, how are ya?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It is so great to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to have you here. I know we've talked before and connected, and what a fun connection that we've had and made. It's been pretty
Agreed.
fun. So, attunement, can you tell us what on earth does that mean?
It's based on what I know about you and have heard, I think your listeners already have heard this, but let me just expand on it a little bit.
Yeah,
The way God made us, we are not born with the ability to self-regulate emotionally. We've got just billions of undifferentiated neurons. And it's this interaction with the primary caregiver, typically the mother, but not
yeah,
necessarily. But it's that early on. By the way, starting in the third trimester of pregnancy, the
yeah.
babies are just inherently subconsciously because they can't form the words, but they're crying out, "Is there anyone there for me?" And it's not just location, is there, standing beside me. It's this sense of, does anybody out there have my back? Does anybody care for me? Does
Mm-hmm.
anybody adore me, love me?
Mm-hmm.
And the way they're designed to sense that, be aware of that, is this close contact that's visual, that's using words, that's using touch between the baby, the infant, and the primary caregiver, normally the mother.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, we know that it's during that last trimester that
Hmm.
babies are starting to connect with vocal sounds
Yes.
and stress that,
Yeah.
the mom may or may not be under. And so if they're
Hmm.
learning
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
before they even come out of the womb, I'll just go down a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Hmm.
They're people. They're people. They're real. They're
Nice.
human beings.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that third
So,
trimester is important. We know now. We used to think that the baby was protected from cortisol, but now we know that cortisol,
mm-mm.
which is the stress hormone, does cross the placenta. So
Yeah.
stressed mom, stressed baby; depressed mom, depressed baby. I mean, I'm not
Hmm.
I'm not judging the mom. It happens, right? Life
No,
is life.
right,
Sometimes parents are in stressful situations, poverty
right.
or whatever, danger, whatever it could be, or
Hmm.
anger
Hmm.
or struggle
Hmm.
between them and their spouses or partners. So cortisol is, it just happens. But what happens in the baby is it stunts growth of good neurons in
Yeah,
the baby's head. So when the baby's born, they need positive attunement dramatically. And
yeah,
for attachment theorists, which I love, it's 1 out of 3 interactions. If moms can do that attunement connecting 1 out of 3, that's not 9 out of, it's 1 out of 3. The baby
hmm,
will, all other things equal. I mean, there's also
hmm.
diseases and things like that, but all other
Sure.
things equal, the baby will enter their next stage of growth secure.
Yeah. And I think one of the very first acts of that post
Mhm.
birth is that skin to skin contact
Oh,
that we're coming
excellent.
to understand. And
Right. What
I
do you
can
tell
tell
people
you,
about that? Yeah.
well, I think it's just because the baby's so used to having that
Mm,
personal skin to skin contact. That's all
mm,
that child has been used to the
mm.
last 9 months. And so getting to know the smells and connect
Yeah.
with the rhythm of the heartbeat, which
Yep.
is 90% of what they've been listening to the whole time they've been
Yeah.
growing in there. It's interesting. I can tell you a short story.
Hmm.
My middle daughter,
Hmm.
Rocky, her first child was born under really stressful circumstances. The cord was wrapped around his neck. His,
Mm.
you know, um, heart rate dropped drastically.
Oh my.
And it was literally, I was there for it, as was her husband, Peter. And I mean, it was literally like one of those TV dramas where you see a bunch of doctors running down the hall with the gurney and shouting orders. And
Wow.
so from the time of her second labor pain to the birth of this little guy was literally just 10 minutes.
Oh my
And
goodness.
yeah, super stressful, super scary
Yep.
for everyone involved. And they didn't even have time to give her anesthetic. They put her out, ripped the baby out, even nicked his little head with the scalpel because her fluids had gone. They were gone. And so when she came to, she had no anesthesia to protect her mind from all of the surgical processes that had hit her.
Oh my.
So
Oh my.
she was incapable of that skin to skin contact. They were trying to manage her pain. So Peter stepped in and they said, we know skin to skin's important to you guys. Mom can't do it. Peter, do you want to do it? And he's like, oh, well, yes. I mean, you could see it hadn't even hit him that he would be the one doing it. But he was indeed the parent that did that very first skin to skin contact. And
He's my hero.
first, I have pictures and it's just so heartwarming. But I will tell you now, this little guy is 7 years old. And who's his hero?
Yeah.
He
Dad.
and his dad. Dad
he's
is
everything.
Boy. Totally.
So,
and
so you're saying it was that initial connection maybe that caused that.
I wonder. I mean, and Peter's an awesome father, and so that's probably another big piece of it. He is very patient and kind and all of those things. But he was the one to do that skin to skin, and he's the one that I mean, Sylvan loves his mommy, you know, but if he can do anything with dad, man, that's the deal.
I got this great quote from Dr. David Arredondo. Listen to this. This is on attunement, but I just love it. I use it in all my talks. And he's imagining this mom, he was speaking of mom, holding the baby, and there's that connection, that neural connection where the neurons are mirroring. There's oxytocin and dopamine popping off in the baby's brain, and in the mother's. That's just how things have been designed. And so, in that moment of attunement, this is what he says: this mother and this baby are in a process, a form of reciprocal connectedness called attunement. His eyes and her eyes are locked together. Not just locked together, but dancing together, really. And in this child's brain, 1,000 connections per second are being formed. In that attunement, 1,000 per second. And this child is learning to read facial expression. The child is learning about the world. He's learning about that the world is responsive or not responsive. He's learning that he can be an object of delight and that he can delight others. He's learning what he's worth. He's learning what the world is like. He's learning so much so quickly, we can't even conceive of it.
Yeah, absolutely. The brain development within that first year of life is just phenomenal. And so I love that you brought that up. And I love the idea of them dancing.
Right?
Yes.
Right. And you moms feel that. I mean, more than men because of the oxytocin, but it's almost like I can't get the baby away from you. There's a dance going on. It's like, can I cut in or something like that?
Yeah, it's and I know that very often medical professionals that are there, it's like, okay, we got to take the baby now. We got to, clean them up, check them, make sure everything's okay.
That's right.
And that's a hard give for a mom.
And for the baby too, because the baby is just cruising with all of that. I was talking to another doctor yesterday, I guess, and they brought up, well, what do you say to mothers who, for whatever reason, postpartum or, like you said, health reasons, couldn't do that? Now what? So they missed that opportunity. Maybe it was 3 weeks, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 9 months. But what do they do now that the child's a toddler or now that the child's... And my answer was really the same thing. It's just a different context, and you're not going to be able to hold them necessarily and go goo, goo, goo. Maybe they're talking, but you can still look them in the eye and say, what I suggest, what I teach people of toddlers and tweens is you put your hand, if you can, if it's okay, on their shoulder, below their shoulder. I'm not quite sure
Mm-hmm.
why that works. I had a doctor tell me that a long time ago, and I've used it quite a bit. And say, look them in the eye, pull them close, and go, "Do you know how big a fan of yours I am, or how much I
Absolutely.
love you?" My son-in-law does that with his son, my grandson, and he says, "Malcolm." Says, "Why is it that I love you so much?" And he just waits for Malcolm to respond, and he just does it randomly throughout the day.
Yeah.
It is attunement. It's the eye connection. It's the touch. It's flesh on flesh. It's oral. It's by words, and that kind of connection. Again, if parents can intentionally, I know life's difficult, but if parents
Yeah.
can do that 1 out of 3 interactions, see, that gives you 2 interactions where you can totally mess up. We need that. We need that. But 1 out of 3 intentionally throughout the day, it is amazing the neural response. The child will end up being more secure, happier, more exploring the world. They'll feel safe. They'll make friends better. They'll be kinder.
Mm-hmm.
All other things equal, they'll be kinder to the
Mm-hmm.
parents, to their teachers. And I work with primarily parents of teenagers and tweens. And if parents did that, oh my gosh, adolescence would be so much easier. It's going to be hard anyway because of, again,
Yeah.
neuroscience. But, if they had that trusted relationship with the parent, which is largely due to attunement, it would be so much easier then.
Yeah. Yeah. I work with parents, but I
Mm.
also work with teachers
Oh,
who are dealing with very difficult students, especially
mm-hmm,
in those primary grades. So that's kindergarten, first and second grade. And that's part of what I teach them is that even when you have that child that's constantly
mm-hmm,
challenging or
mm-hmm,
throwing temper tantrums
mm-hmm,
or whatever, but if you're letting that kid know that you love them,
mm-hmm.
what is it that I love about you? And I can remember one year I had a particularly rough year, and I worked mostly in very low income, high risk schools. That
Okay.
was my
All
specialty.
right.
That's what I love to do.
So
And I had
stressed
this
kids, stressed
very
kids with
stressed
stressed parents. Got
gang
it.
activity. More than half of
Mm-hmm,
my
mm-hmm,
class every year had incarcerated family. And I had 1 to 3 homeless kids. There was a homeless
mm-hmm.
shelter in our school zone. And so we would get, a kid to or 3 from there often.
Yeah.
But anyway, I had this one little guy. And when he lost it, he didn't even really scream or yell. He would just start knocking things off of the shelves. He would knock over tables. He would,
Mm-hmm,
just get
mm-hmm,
really upset.
mm-hmm.
But this kid was the most honest kid I ever met in my life. And so, we had a thing where we were kindergarten. And so we had our own bathroom. We had a boys and a girls within, just in the classroom, they
Got
could
it.
go. And sometimes someone would come out and say, someone didn't flush, right? And I'm like, oh, who forgot to flush? And if it was this little guy, I'll call him James, he'd say, oh, that's probably me. And he'd get up and go, well, all the other kids, they would like lie. They'd be embarrassed. They'd
Sure.
lie, not me, not me. It's like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
you were the
Yeah, I
last
would have
one
been
in there,
there. I
buddy.
would have been there.
Yeah, 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 for sure. But anyway, it was the last day of school and we had
Mm-hmm,
our little graduation,
mm-hmm,
and all of the other parents took their kids
mm-hmm,
home after that little
mm-hmm,
morning graduation.
mm-hmm,
Well, James, his mom was working, and so she could barely make the graduation. She had to rip
mm-hmm,
off as soon as it was over. He was the only child I had for the rest of the
mm-hmm,
day. In
mm-hmm.
fact, he was the only child in the entire kindergarten
Oh
that
wow.
didn't go home with his family after
Oh
graduation.
wow.
So we were just busy doing stuff and putting things away. And he was my helper boy, and we were
Mm-hmm,
walking down the hall to put some stuff away. And one of the teachers, not the
mm-hmm,
kindergarten teacher, it was
mm-hmm,
another grade,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but she said, wait, you have a student? And I'm like, yeah, I've got a student. And he's standing right there. And she says, geez, of all the kids, I wanted to slap her. I
She said
wanted
that.
to slap. Yeah. Yeah. And so I said, I know of all the kids that could have stayed, I got James. How lucky am
I
I? And
know.
I'm
That's
giving her
one
the
out of
look
three.
like, you.
Yeah.
And I said, James, tell Miss So-and-so, tell her why, why I like you. And he said, because I tell the truth.
Wow. He had identity.
He had that, and that was his
So
identity.
this is fascinating. Yeah, I want to pick your brain. So, ideally in a healthy situation, healthy mom,
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
stress. I mean, minimal stress, life
Yeah.
stress. But did you see kids that were attunement deficit? I don't know if that's the right term. Yeah.
Yes, yes, especially. I had another year, I had a little boy who
Mm.
we he could only use markers. He was not allowed to use pencils because if he got irritated with someone, he would stab another child with the
Yeah.
pencil.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And just a lot of anger and all of that.
Yeah.
But my goal as a teacher and as a mom, I've got my own 5 kids and now I've got 12 grandkids. But
Right.
as a teacher, my goal was that every child in my class knew that
Mhm.
I saw something that was special
Mhm.
in them and about them.
Mhm.
So with
Mhm.
James, it was being honest.
Okay.
With like
Okay.
Joey, it might have
Okay.
been, you're really good at helping other students.
I got it. So you found one thing that you
Mhm.
could praise them for that could
Mhm.
become the staple in their identity. And they
Mhm.
always had that. Even if they messed up, they always had that.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was
Mhm.
never taken away.
Mhm.
And in fact, another step that was important to me, and
Mhm.
this could work for parents as well as teachers,
Mhm. Mhm.
is not only did that child know
Mhm.
what it was that I thought was
Mhm.
great about them,
Yep.
every kid in the class knew.
Yeah. 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 Yep. Oh,
Every
wonderful.
kid knew
So
James
uh,
was honest.
you've been at this a while. Did it stick with them into their tween years and teen years?
With some of them, they did. I'm still in contact with a lot of my families.
Mhm.
Unfortunately,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
last thing I heard about James was he and his siblings had been placed in foster care. And
Yeah,
so,
that's part of real life
yeah,
nowadays, isn't it?
yeah, it broke my heart to hear that. But so I haven't been able to know how that worked with him.
Yeah.
But with some of my other kids, I mean, I've got some in sixth, seventh, eighth grade that'll still
Mhm.
call me the first week of school and say, "Hey, I'm starting this," and they still will remember what their thing was.
Yeah.
I have a little girl that was very musical. She loved music. She was very well behaved, very
Yeah.
smart, great reader,
Yep.
but music was her thing. And every year she'll call and sing me a song on the phone.
Because you told her
So
music was her thing. She was
yeah, like,
musical.
oh, you love music. She's like, when she'd be
Yeah.
working, she would
Mhm.
hum and do a little
Mhm.
singing while she was
Mhm.
working.
Mhm.
And I'd noticed in another, you have different specialists, art,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
you know, music,
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And she was in an art class. I went to go pick them up, and I
Mhm.
heard the art teacher was getting after her
Mhm.
because while she was working and doing her project, she was singing to herself.
Yeah.
And that irritated the teacher. And I
I
thought,
see.
you're an art teacher of all things.
I
What?
see. I see. I see.
you know. And
Oh my
so,
goodness, that's one of the problems. I mean, we could work this. I mean, we could work this out as a society if we spend as much time training parents on attunement, something so simple. I mean,
yes.
even in their birthing classes or whatever it might be, is to say, look, one out of
Mm-hmm.
three times, and here's how you do it. Hold the doll up and just say to them and find, like you just did. I think it's brilliant. Find the one thing that you can always praise and and just let that child get that sense of identity and let the neurons start
Yeah.
developing. So there's new studies out. You're probably familiar with them, but me dealing with teens and tweens and addicts as adults
Oh,
is if the child doesn't get successful attunement, whatever that is, in their context,
mm-hmm.
they're going to be they're addictive prone. There's even
Yeah.
one study that basically links attunement in the first 2 years with the chance they'll be in jail by the time they're 21. I mean, it's that
Yeah.
connective. Now, there's times for reparation during adolescence. The brain's blowing up again, and you can restructure things. And parents or caregivers have kind of a mulligan, I describe it, where they can go and do the same thing for their child,
Yeah.
but they have to do
Yeah.
it intentionally. And there's already lots of water under the bridge.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think that's a part of why I do the work I do with
Yeah.
parents of young kids. I
Yep.
love
Good
it.
for you.
And it doesn't happen often enough
Yep.
when I get an expectant parents calling me and saying, hey, we want to be the best parents.
Right.
And do you have a program for me? And I'm like, well, of course I do. But
Right.
if we can start out in those first early years and build that foundation on a rock, so to
Yep.
speak,
1 out of 3 times.
yes, and let them engage and understand the development of kids. So many times I'll hear, at a store or on a playground or something, and they'll get mad at a kid and say, act your age. And I keep wanting to say, they are.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not.
Yeah. But a lot
that's
of
how they were
parents
raised
don't
too.
Understand. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a cycle.
So we have boundaries, but we have loving boundaries. And we don't have to yell and scream and get mad to enforce our boundaries. We have to stand strong is what we have to do. But you can do that.
Where we lost that ability in the first 1 to 2 years to our brain developing the capability to emotionally self-regulate. And if my parent didn't do that for me for my first year, I mean, when I'm dysregulating, crying out, thinking, is anybody there? If they didn't come along and soothe me and emotionally regulate me, my brain's not going to learn how to do that. And so they will use things like drugs later on to self-soothe, or sex to self-soothe, or pornography to self-soothe, or go into a gang and just fight it out.
Yeah. And I know that it's getting harder for our kids because so much of that is being thrown at them now in society, online, in their
social media.
socials.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Even from teachers at school, teaching them things that go against the God piece that's inside of them.
Yeah.
And that's confusing to them. And it's coming at them at an earlier and earlier and earlier age. And so it's our role as a parent to get them ready and to get them, able to know that you are loved and you are fine. And,
and you're talking specific things that can be done. And it's not necessarily a Christian thing. These are things that are in our brain design, but it's specific things that are not mythological or esoteric. It's like, here are 3 things you can do, and do them regularly and intentionally do them. And your child will grow up to be, all things equal, more secure and happier and more, they'll do better in school. They'll be less prone to addiction. Oh my gosh. We just don't teach it.
No,
you do.
We don't.
I get that. You do.
Oh, yeah.
And I do.
Come to me. Little Hearts Academy.
Totally. There it is. Go to Little Hearts Academy.
And I've got programs, I've got coaching, I've got all of that to help you learn.
You do. I bet you do.
One of the key things is just understanding what are they learning at this point. And because they never ever stop learning. I've had parents who would argue and they say, but we only argue when the kids are asleep. Trust me, because I grew up in that home. They're not sleeping. And even if they are, it still comes in and works in on them. But that first year is so important. You cannot spoil a child under 1 year of age.
Yeah.
You hold them, you love them, you nurture them.
Yeah, I think with maternity leave, which I'm for, I think we should send moms home, caregivers home with a workbook. Here are things you should do on your maternity leave for your self-awareness. And that's some of the things I work on in Good Enough Parenting, is how to teach the parent actually to co-regulate with God more. So they're coming they're coming to their child, not needing the child to make them feel like a good parent, but actually their cup's overflowing, so they are a good parent for the child. All important, but we can make them, give them notes of 5 or 6 things they can do each day. Simple, not overwhelming. I think it would make a big difference. I think we have less people shooting up schools. I mean, I think I saw an article. I wish I have to find it, but it was at the top 20 school shootings, all men, boys under 21, but only 2 of them were psychologically psychopaths. The rest, I think it was 3 out of 20. The rest were actually had mental issues, emotional issues that could be solved either through medication or by loving care. It's shocking. I think we've got solutions to this problem. Not 100%, but
right.
17 out of 20.
Yeah. Hello there. Right. And so are we giving them the coping skills to deal with if I'm being bullied all the time, or so I'll let you know, my youngest daughter went to Columbine High School.
There we go. Was she there when the shooting took place?
No. She was there long after, but the same principal was there. He stayed there for another 20 years. You know Frank?
I do. I spoke to him about 6 months ago. We're trying to work together on a certain project. You know what? He was telling me that what he's fascinated by and deeply troubled by is what you were saying, is kids in middle school and even younger are becoming violent.
Yeah.
They're pushing teachers. They're fighting back, like you said, that knocking things off. He's concerned because those kids are going to grow older, and obviously their parents don't seem to know what we've been talking about. The 1 out of 3 occasions. The poor kid just cannot self-soothe, and so is resorting to anger. That's how our brain is made too. Yeah.
Frank is great, and he has some great insights on. So if you see, his name is Frank DeAngelis for my listeners. And if you want to find him, I know he's on all the socials, and he's got a website, and he's Google him, Frank DeAngelis. And and then he was the principal at Columbine when it happened. And then for another 20 years. Yep. And we were there with my daughter Noelle towards the end of those 20 years. Okay. He finished his tour of duty, so to speak, a couple of years after Noelle graduated. But so really looking into some of those things that, bullying's going to happen. And I think too, we're so worried about our kids being bullied that we're unable to look at the possibility that my child is a bully.
Yep.
And I will tell you, I think almost every child becomes a bully at some point. Not
interesting.
Not for long pieces of time, but any child, if they're hungry, they didn't eat, or they haven't slept, or there's stress going on that they don't know how to manage. We're asking kids to manage stress that adults don't handle well.
Yeah. No, that's true. Look around, right?
Yeah. And if we're attuned, sorry, get my words turned around. If we're attuned to our kids and we can see some of that. Oh, so maybe there are some financial issues, or maybe mom and dad aren't getting along, or there's been a divorce, or, that's all part of life.
Postpartum depression.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. My daughter there, she dealt with it significantly. And I don't know if it's because of that, the way the birth came about or what, but she was smart enough to keep asking questions until she found a doctor who could actually help her. So keep asking. But I think too, if those stresses are going on, the kids are fine. Or I've heard, the kids are young. All the worse. They have no idea what's going on. Daddy left and it must be my fault. Mommy left and it must be my fault.
And see, that speaks to that lack of trust. And all we're talking about is for the parent to come real close, draw the child, whether it's a toddler or an infant, and go, do you know how much I love you? Or if they're an infant, I'm here, baby. I'm here. I've got it. Look at me. Goo, 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 goo. Look at me. And just hold the baby until they co-regulate. And it's normal. It's how we've been created.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand big problem. I've been a pastor for 30 years. The big problem is the parents are stressed. They're worried about messing up. They don't know what to do. They were raised without this often, and so they believe that they're not a good mom, not a good dad, and
Mm-hmm.
that just gets, like cortisol passing through the placenta.
Yeah.
That kind of depression and insecurity and low self-esteem gets passed on to the infant subconsciously, and then
Yeah.
you got even more problems. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, so
Exactly. So I think, just checking in
yeah,
and realizing that if you split up, and I'll tell you what, even if they are tweens and
yeah,
teens,
yeah,
often they'll blame themselves. If I'd have been a better kid, if I'd have, so from the time they're very
yeah,
little, you want to reassure them and
yeah,
say, you are loved by more
yeah.
than you know. So I have a granddaughter who my son divorced in his first marriage, so
Mhm.
my son has her
Yeah,
um, um, for a lot of reasons, but not that
got it.
the ex-wife was a bad. She's I like her,
Yeah,
I don't like what happened, but I like her, and I think
yep.
she's a great little mom. And
Hmm.
so every other week, my son
Hmm.
is driving 3.5 hours one way
Hmm.
to make sure that
Hmm.
she's with her
Hmm.
mom for that weekend,
Hmm.
and then he goes down and picks her up and brings her back. And
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
uh and so in talking to my granddaughter, I said, do you understand that you have more people who love you in your life than a lot of
Hmm.
people do? And
Oh
so we
yeah,
started
I
talking
bet she
about,
does.
her stepmom and her stepdad and her,
Hmm.
uh, even her step grandparents,
Hmm.
and I have a brother-in-law that small world has business with her stepdad's dad, so her step granddad,
Hmm.
and they just
Hmm.
love her. What's
Hmm.
not to love
Hmm.
with this kid?
Hmm.
But it's fun to just kind of talk to her and reassure her,
Hmm.
that it didn't work out, and that's sad, and we wish it could have, but it didn't. And
Yeah,
it was not about you. And now you have, look at all these people you have in
right.
your life and in your family that just adore you,
And it's
and
not too
talk to
late.
them in
What
ways like that.
there
No.
there's so I talk about a toddler attunement. I talk about tween attunement, adolescent attunement, even adult attunement
Mm-hmm.
for marriage relationship. And it's
Yeah.
it's the same thing firing in my brain. My brain subconscious, as an infant, it was asking one question: is there anybody there for me? Attachment theorists have kind of parsed that into two questions when they become toddler and have voice. Is there anybody who has my back, who I can actually trust when I
Mm-hmm.
mess up?
Yeah.
I feel safe with. And the second one is there anybody out there who actually loves me, that I can see it in their face? Man, adults are asking that question. Addicts are asking that question. Teens, oh my goodness, are asking
Mm-hmm.
that question 24/7. Social
Yeah.
media pretends to answer that question and then keeps pulling moving the goalpost, and so it's very
Yeah. Yeah. Social media is not a good place
Mhm.
for adults or kids, to be quite
It
honest.
yeah, I'm a big fan of not letting children onto social media
Yeah.
until well into their teens. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if you got to get them a phone, get them a flip phone, get
Mm-hmm.
them a dumb
Mm-hmm.
phone. And it's just dangerous at this point, and parents
Yeah.
can't be
Yeah.
everywhere. It's
Yeah.
got a lot of good to it. I mean, we're on it, right?
Yeah.
But
Right. Right.
yeah, we got to
Well,
be aware of what's going on in our brains.
and I know the parents are scared, like if something happened at the
Mm,
school or
totally.
whatever. And so I understand that. And they have
Yeah.
like watches now that you can use, and
Yeah.
and they have special phones. But
Yep.
I would be really careful that, I mean, I had some of my kindergartners had phones, which I thought was a little
Do you
early.
agree with that? When do you think it's safe to have social media? What age? What stage of life?
For me, I would say like 17.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Depending
that's
upon the
me.
context. Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm. But
I'm
I would
there.
make sure
15, 16,
whenever they
17.
did get that and started in social media,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that I've had, and my
Hmm.
husband, we've had a chance to talk to them and educate
Yeah.
them and
Yep.
let them know. So here's just a little thing for you guys is most of you, I think, have heard of Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard's program, where they rescue children from the sex slaves.
Yep.
But they have a program on their website. And so it's OUR Rescue. I think it's a .com or .org. It's probably a .org. But they have a video presentation on how to pay attention to your children so that they are not being exposed to predators on social media.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah. And it's free.
Yeah, that's a must.
You don't even have to pay for it.
That's really good. That's really good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I would highly recommend that one. Yeah. And so we get them from that first year, and we've nurtured them and loved them, and they know if I cry, my mom's going to come get me, or my dad's going to come get me, or maybe a big brother or sister. I mean, I was 10 when the twins were born. They were numbers 5 and 6, and then my mom had another one the summer before my senior year of high school. And so for me, I did a lot of that nurturing and loving, and it's funny because
it makes a difference.
That youngest brother is the one I'm closest to, even today. So I mean, we're all close, but Danny's special. Absolutely. Sure. And so we go from that first year, and then we go to what I call the terrific twos, because they're learning so much. It's coming in so much, but we get tired of the tantrums. We get tired of, I want it now, or I'm refusing to go to bed, or because now they're starting to exert their independence. Yeah. Right. And so once they start exerting that independence in their own way, what do you think about with developing that attunement so that you're still, no, it's bedtime, sweetheart, we're going to go to bed, but I still love you. And what are some of the suggestions that you bring to the table?
Yeah, let me brag on my son-in-law Jeff with my one of my grandsons Malcolm. So when he was 3 and 4, he's 6 now. But what Jeff he's got this down. What Jeff did, he gives random signs of affection to Malcolm. I mean, he walks up to him in the middle of the day and looks at him and says, I think I shared this, Malcolm, do you know how much I love you? I just wanted to say that. See ya. And it was like these, these drive-by shootings of that. But going to bed, that's what triggered this. Is they have a kind of a shotgun house, and so the bedroom is at the end of the house, and he goes, there's a long hallway out of the bedroom and back to a window, and so Jeff, he says he dresses down, he very informal, floppy socks and everything. Malcolm is on the bed standing. He's going to bed, right? And they start in the bedroom, and Jeff goes, okay, Malcolm, are you ready for running kisses? He calls it running kisses. And Malcolm, are you ready? And he goes, yeah, Dad, I'm ready. And so Jeff starts backing up, and are you still ready? And, just building up the expectation. He goes all the way back to the end of the house, and he goes, okay, Malcolm, I'm coming. 1, 2, 3. And he starts running goofy, funny, hilariously down the hall so Malcolm can see. So he's getting all energetic and excited. And when he gets to the bed, he tackles him and he just kisses him all over, saying, how much I love you, how much I love you, how much I love you. And he says that's the last thing Malcolm knows, experiences before he goes to bed. And then he talks about, by the way, Malcolm, you have a heavenly Father who loves you that much. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that is brilliant. Every day Malcolm would get that weird dad running to him and humiliating himself, if you will, just to say how much he's loved. And Malcolm is a very, very secure kid. I was looking for, this is a quote, this is kind of a negative one, but this is Susie Gruber. She talks about the invisible ACE, but this is what she's noticed from a child who received little attunement. Can I read this?
Oh, please.
It's brutal. It's brutal. This is what Susie Gruber says. So what happens inside little ones who frequently experience this sort of misattunement? They stop expressing their need. They learn to unconsciously reject their needs, to then shut down and disconnect from their needs. Children who experience this sort of deprivation give up their demand for caring and love. They decide unconsciously there's no hope that their needs will be met. Giving up becomes a common way to respond to stress. As the child matures, she becomes used to living with those unmet physical and emotional needs. She develops survival strategies like being really helpful to others and needing very little for herself. She has an unconscious belief that her deepest needs don't matter and she doesn't matter. She may feel erased and empty, like she doesn't exist. When she risks expressing a need, she gives up easily if someone doesn't respond. When caregivers consistently attune to a baby's need, in contrast, neural networks are built in the brain that support the development of communication and social skills. But where there is consistent misattunement, a baby lives in a state of constant stress due to unmet needs, creating significant emotional and physiological issues.
Yeah.
Subconscious. The baby is just difficult to communicate with. I bet there's moms who are listening to your show who go, "Oh my gosh, that might explain Betty or Johnny or." And it's fixable because our brains have plasticity, but we start with the 1 out of 3. Hey, do you know how much I love you? I'm your biggest fan. I'd buy stock in you. Whatever in your context resonates with your child, right?
Yeah.
We
You know,
can
and
fix
I've
it.
seen those kids. I've seen those kids
The shut
come
down
through my
ones.
classroom.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen them.
I bet you
And
have.
I will tell you, so my youngest child, we adopted, and she was 12 years old when she came to our family. She'll tell her friends or people that she was 12 years overdue. But
yeah, I bet she has a story or two.
oh my goodness. And she was 7 years in foster care with 11 different placements and 2 other failed adoptions. So, you know, it was, and even as an adult, and she's married and she's got her own little guy, but I can see that. And you talk about putting others' needs in front of their own, you know, and this can be a wonderful thing. She is the most forgiving person I've ever met in my life. Singularly, never met anyone who would, she'll forgive. You could slap her in the face and an hour later invite her to lunch and she'd probably go with you. And, you know, and think, oh, we're friends again, you know? And so it's the bad part is she's been taken advantage of often because of that.
You can forgive for the wrong reasons. You can forgive because you don't think you're worth you know, the injustice.
Yeah, I don't know. She's starting to stick up for herself. She's a big 27 now. And so she's starting to come to terms, and we're talking a lot about it. And but you see that, you know, where in fact, after we adopted her, she said she's had this rant, like it went on for 4 hours of screaming and yelling and where did this come from? And finally she said, you're just going to throw me back in the system. Let's get it over with.
Oh my goodness. There we go. Oh my gosh. Fear cycle kicked in to fight.
Yeah.
By the way, you don't know this about me, but my doctoral thesis was on biblical forgiveness. We actually have an online thing, couple hours, 2.5 hours on how to biblically forgive. I think we've totally messed it up, and we've had 1,000+ people go through this thing. And in 2.5 hours, desire for revenge goes down 21%. Desire to be empathetic goes up 38%. Sense of a justice for whatever was done to me goes up 78%. It's ridiculous how well it works. It's called Forgiving Path. People can track it down at forgivingpath.com. It's a slight fee. I forget how much it is, but it's a fraction of a counseling visit. It's like $29, something like that, to do the 2 hours. We've had dramatic results. We've had abuse victims, attempted murder victims. We've had rape victims. We've had addicts regularly. Addicts always have something they need to forgive, but parents, you know, mommy issues and daddy issues. Anyway, just on the side, forgivingpath.com, and your listeners may find that very valuable.
Well, we'll be sure and put that in our show notes. And so if you're listening, you're interested, just pop down to the show notes. And while you're there, if you like what you've heard today, give us a 5-star rating and review. It's real easy, just a click away. So, yeah. So how would our listeners find you, get a hold of you?
Yeah. So they can track down my podcast, Gospel Rant, at gospelrant.com. And I do have a store, so they can track down the Forgiving Path there, and there's a couple of other things.
Mm,
The thing that I'm really passionate about is my Good Enough Parent, and it's totally free. It's online. It's 15 tips we send to parents of teens and tweens, but it's good for toddlers as well. It helps
yeah.
you understand what's going on in your brain as a parent, your child's brain. Talks about plasticity. It talks about attachment theory and attunement at various stages. I really recommend it. When people register at Good Enough Parent dot online, they get 15 tips, short biblical video tips at one a day for 15 days. And like I said, it's already funded, so it's free. It's just people just come and take that. And you can find more about that at gospelrant.com. The other thing, and again, speaking to parents, because we tend to beat up parents, and
Yeah.
here's the thing that I say as a pastor of 30 years is, we can talk about infant attunement, toddler attunement, tween attunement, teen attunement, the spiritual attunement. And I've got these busted inner working models with critical inner voice, and it's causing me to not feel loved by God. Jesus purchased that love 2,000 years ago, but there's
Right.
something inside my brain that's broken
Yeah.
and refuses it's these strongholds, spiritual, emotional strongholds. And so John Calvin said the Holy Spirit in Christians' inner being, his secret workings is to make Christians actually feel loved by God today, because we all need that. It's very sophisticated
Mm-hmm.
of John Calvin. But we've prepared these bookmarks. Can I read the simple, uncluttered gospel? What I tell addicts, what I tell teenagers, we actually have a teenage version. Parents, we have a parent version. It's the same thing, but let me read this, and
Yes.
you'll see what I mean. Uh, it's that spiritual, asking for that spiritual attunement from God so that I can be a better parent. So I emotionally and spiritually regulate, so I don't use my child
Mm-hmm.
for my identity. And we all do, right? I mean,
Right.
that's
Don't
our little
we?
secret. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we go. So here's the simple, uncluttered God. And we recommend that people say it twice a day. I still do. Jesus follower, strictly because of what Jesus did for you 2,000 years ago, God actually loves you. He loves you with all of his heart, as much as the Father loves the Son and the Son loves the Father. He can't love you any more or any less than he does right now. I mean, think Jeff with the running kisses. He loves you as you are, not as you should be or could be. You can't add to this love or take away from it. Now, I get it. It often feels like you've messed it up or need to do something so that God would like you better, but not so. How do you experience it more now? Simple, good news. There is something you can do and are invited to do. You can take daily baby steps to ask the Spirit inside of you to make you know, experience, and feel just how much God loves you right now. Just ask. Ask again later today, ask tomorrow, make it a spiritual habit. So they can
I
go to
love
that
that.
go to that pod page, gospelrant.com, and get these. They're really cheap. Or they could just play your podcast over and over and over until they memorize it. But either way,
There you
word
go.
for word, we're creating a new habit. So it really does, you know how habits are. So it needs to be word for word. It needs to be spoken aloud often. So
Mm-hmm.
twice a day for 30,
Mm-hmm.
40 days. DJ, I have seen miracles. It's not scripture, but it's preaching the gospel to my critical inner voice. I've seen porn addicts rescued. I've seen attempted murder addicts really kind of come back to life. I've seen marriages saved because of people just preaching this gospel to their critical inner voice. It's all of this. All of this is doable.
Yeah.
It's doable.
It
It's
absolutely
not
is.
rocket science.
Yeah. And it's not something that happens overnight.
No,
You know,
that's a good
I'm
point.
not going to
Thank you
read
for
this
saying that.
twice in one day and tomorrow I'll be fine.
Thank you for saying that. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. We're building a habit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gosh, I love what we have going on here and what you've had to offer. I always ask
Mm.
my guests the same final question, and so I'm going to ask you as well. How would you describe a successful parent?
This is easy because this is why we call our program Good Enough Parent. It's that 1 out of 3. intentional attunements where the parent,
Mhm.
caretaker, guardian takes their child, no matter what age, looks them in the eye, holds them, puts hands
Mhm.
around them, and says how much they love them. 1 out of 3 interactions. It's
Yeah.
so doable,
And no matter what age they are.
no matter what age. In adults.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
my
Oh,
kids are from 42 to
yeah.
29,
Yep.
and it's still the same.
I recommended one lady. She's estranged from one of her children, a boy, and
Oh.
so what do I
Mhm.
do? And he's moved away, and I said, look, here it is. Here's the intentional attunement. Call them up and leave a message on their leave or a text file and
Yeah.
say, do you know how much I love you? Just want to let you know. See ya, and do that often until that's drip,
Yeah.
drip, drip does something inside of their brain because that's what they're looking for. That's what I'm
And
looking
that's
for.
what they need. And that's what they need.
Hmm. How we're
And
made.
so, yeah. And so it never ends
Mm-mm.
because I think even beyond the veil,
Hmm.
it continues,
Yeah.
you know. There
Yeah.
have been times that I have felt my dad. My dad died when I was 35. I wasn't a kid, but he's big
Mm-hmm.
scientist, very well known
Mm.
scientist
Mm.
in his sphere.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
Right. But one time, before I had my degree, I was doing some substitute teaching, and I was asked to
Mhm.
substitute teach in a honors high school science class. And I'm like, oh, crap.
Your dad would
We'll
love
see how
that.
this goes. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I walked into that room and I
Mm.
felt my dad there. He was there helping me through
Mm.
the day, the strongest I've ever felt him since he's passed.
Yeah,
And
the crowd of many witnesses in Hebrews, maybe that's what that's
mhm,
about. I mean, it's a little
maybe.
mysterious.
Yep. But yeah. So anyway, it never ends in my mind. That attunement and reaching out never ends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Bill Senyard, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Been a
And
pleasure.
oh, thank you. And I know that I'm going to want to have you back at some point again.
I would be honored. Thank you. I've
Thank
learned
you
so much
so
just
much.
just picking your brain. I'd love to pick your brain more about your working with stressed families and the
Yeah.
impoverished stressed families.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I
gotta help them.
even, um, before I got my teaching license, I
Hmm.
was certified and worked with the Division of Family and Youth
Hmm.
Services
Hmm.
as a parenting facilitator. And
Mm.
I actually taught parenting classes in 2 women's prisons.
Yeah, why not? That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Good
I
on
learned
you for that.
so much about God and myself and
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
and these women.
It's great.
And so, yeah, such a blessing, such a blessing. We'll have to continue the conversation, but thank you so much for being here and being part of our show. And we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thank you.